Makes sense. Well, I think I give you a heads up because I didn't want you to have to sit here and then they'll get you back to call it. If I need something from you, I'll get a hold of you, but I don't see it.
You have my cell phone?
Do you get your email on it?
Yes.
I'll shoot you an email from the
Okay, well, if you need to use that cell phone,
I think you'll be.
Call to order. Welcome everybody. Grand Forks City Council meeting Monday, June 21st. Roll call please, Maureen.
Weigel.
Here.
Doppler. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock. Kavami. Sandy.
Here.
Bean.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Maureen. I think that note Kyle is, I believe, connected on over the phone, so I think we do have him.
All right, thank you.
1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, 1.3, Mayor's announcements. First, I want to recognize we got some new faces here tonight. Boy Scout Troop 130, they're earning their Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge. So thank you for joining us today. This is probably going to be one of your more difficult merit badges that you're ever going to earn. So we'll see how long you make it today, but welcome. Just got a few other announcements. We've got the Mayor's Back the Badge event this Thursday. So if you haven't seen any of that information, take a look. It's going to be at the Grand Cities Mall. Registration from 5 to 6. Go to mayorsbackthebadgeride.com and check that out and see if you can make it. We definitely got to support our police department as much as possible. Coming up next Monday, we're going to have an event that takes place once every 2 years here. We're going to have the change of command for the 319th Reconnaissance Wing at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So it was my privilege to get to spend a year in leadership with Colonel Pringle. Definitely consider him a dear friend, and Colonel Curry is going to be taking over leadership out there, and we're definitely excited to have him. So that event will be taking place on Monday. I got to go out to the Liston Center, if that was last week or 2 weeks ago, but they're breaking ground where the old Travel Lodge used to be, so it's pretty exciting to see development in that area and to see a building that will get much better use. I know they were searching for a home for a long time, and now they're able to find one that's going to be much more permanent. And lastly, we were over at, just on Saturday at the Juneteenth event. I want to thank Hamza Kariko for putting that on and emceeing that event, and as well as Ms. Dockler was there. So all in all, it was a good event. With that, we are going to move on to 2, the appeal hearing.
2.1 is the appeal hearing on City Engineer's order of demolition for dangerous building, the Ambassador Motel.
Thank you. So this is the time and place to the appeal hearing on the city engineer's order of demolition regarding the Ambassador Motel. Ms. Ella Broughton is going to be leading off here, so please, Ms. Broughton, take it over.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, this hearing today, the sole issue in front of you is whether the Ambassador Motel constitutes a dangerous building. This hearing will involve both city personnel as well as Mr. McGregor putting forth any evidence and testimony for consideration by the City Council. And throughout the hearing, if Council has any questions, you can certainly ask those questions. I would encourage you to possibly wait until after both sides have presented their evidence and testimony, as some of your questions may be answered along the way. And in front of you, you will notice a folder of some documents. Some of these documents are part of the record in the underlying court matter of of Grand Forks versus Kenton McGregor. Some of the other documents are procedural in nature. And the reason you didn't receive these in advance of today's hearing is basically a precaution to avoid having any preconceived notions going into this hearing today, to form a basis as to how you might come out at the end. Essentially, you will be acting as the judge and the jury at the hearing today. And so it's important for you to consider not only the information presented by city personnel, but any information, testimony, evidence presented by Mr. McGregor as well. Today's hearing somewhat resembles a trial, so to speak. The only difference between today, not the only difference, but unlike a trial in a court of law, there aren't any objections. No one's going to object to somebody else speaking today. There's no rules of evidence, so each party can present testimony and evidence to support their position. And so with that, I would just briefly like to go over those exhibits that you have in your folder in front of you and offer those into the record. So the first, exhibit, all of the documents at the bottom are numbered. It's called a Bates number. It says Exhibit 1, for example, City Council appeal hearing with the date. So we'll refer to those as exhibits by the number located at the bottom. So the first exhibit, Exhibit 1, is the complaint which the city filed with its motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. This document basically just outlines the facts that gave rise to this matter. If you go to Exhibit 2, that's the affidavit of Brandon Baseflug in support of motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. This is a sworn statement by Mr. Baseflug. It's his factual findings relating to the matter, determining the Ambassador Motel to be a dangerous building and a nuisance. Attached to his affidavit, you will see there's another set of documents. Those were marked as Exhibit A. They were filed along with his affidavit, and those include a copy of the April 8th letter to Mr. McGregor notifying him of the city code violations, to abate the violations and requiring the tenants to vacate the premises. Also included were the respective reports from the various departments, Fire Department, Public Health, and Inspections Department following their inspection of the motel, all of which support Mr. Baseflug's determination that the motel is a dangerous building. Exhibit 3 is the affidavit of Matt Hagman. Matt Hagman is a fire marshal with Grand Forks Fire Department. His affidavit summarizes his observations during the inspection of the motel, also concluding the motel to be a dangerous building or structure, and poses a threat to human life, safety, or health, and is unsafe to occupy. Exhibit number 4 is the affidavit of Brian Getz, again also outlining the factual basis for his determination that the motel is a dangerous building, a threat to human life, safety, health, and unsafe to occupy. Exhibit number 5 is the affidavit of Fire Chief Gary Lorenz, concurring with the findings of Fire Marshals Hagman and Getz, that the motel is a dangerous building, is a fire hazard, and a threat to human life, health, and unsafe to occupy. Affidavit number 6 is the affidavit of James Quigley. This identified multiple violations noted by Public Health during the inspection of the motel, which are documented in his respective report. Again, those reports are all included, attached to the affidavit of Brandon Base Fluke. Exhibit 7 is the temporary restraining order issued by the Grand Forks District Court requiring all tenants to vacate the premises and prohibiting any and all persons from using the motel as a place of habitation. Exhibit 8 is a supplemental affidavit of Brandon Base Fluke. This was filed with the court after the after the hearing on temporary restraining order provided some additional information to the court. Exhibit 9 is the supplemental affidavit of Matt Hagman. This was also filed with the court to provide some additional and updated information specifically regarding the April 23rd fire at the motel. Exhibit 10, those are the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and order granting the city's motion for preliminary injunction. Exhibit 11 is the city engineer's order for demolition. Exhibit 12 is the affidavit of personal service of the order of demolition on Mr. McGregor. Exhibit 13 is Mr. McGregor's notice of appeal of the demolition order. Exhibit 14 is the notice of today's appeal hearing. And lastly, Exhibit 15 is the affidavit of personal service of the notice of today's hearing, which was served upon Mr. McGregor. There is one more document included in your folder. There is a proposed order for council's consideration. We will discuss this order in more depth at the end of today's hearing. So as far as procedure of today's hearing, Mr. McGregor will have an opportunity to present his testimony and evidence. After he's finished, council will hear testimony from city personnel, after which Mr. McGregor will have an opportunity to address council one more time. At the conclusion of the hearing, like I said, I will go over that proposed order that we have provided to you. So at this point, does council have any questions as far as procedural matters? So the city will now turn it over to Mr. McGregor to address council.
Mr. McGregor, if you could step forward and certainly take as much time as you need. Any testimony or evidence you can provide.
Excuse me. We would like to table this matter for an amount of time because we have received an offer that we intend to accept. It was dated on a purchase agreement dated June 18th, and I just got it this morning from a legitimate group, Grand Forks businessmen who want to buy the property, and we intend to accept their offer. I don't know why we would want to continue with what we talked about, what was talked about today. I'd be glad to make some comments, but I don't think that would further what's going on. We want businessmen to take over the property and do with, I don't even know what they're going to do with it, but I know they're known to the city, and I believe it would be great if you would agree to just table it, let the matters go by as they can. It should be a very short period before we have the exact details worked out on that agreement, probably a day or two. And I don't know if we need to discuss it anymore. I believe their intention is to take down the building. The building was built, by the way, by my understanding, Mr. Ralph Engelstead, and he didn't build any bad buildings that I ever heard of. It's not what the city calls dangerous anymore, if it ever was. It has completely solid block walls throughout with 3 fire breaks, I believe there are in the place. And no one is occupying it now, nor will they in the near future. I see no danger to the public at this point, And to me, it makes sense to just move on with the sale of the property to those who will develop it and also will take down the old one. So I don't know if you can make a motion here or not, but that's what I'd like to do.
Anything further, Mr. McGregor? I'll just open it up to questions to council if they want to ask anything.
No, nothing right now.
Okay. Council, any questions for Mr. McGregor at this time? All right, you'll be back up. There'll be a couple more opportunities. Ms. Broughton, if you want to continue, please.
I just would like to point out that I understand that there is a potential sale. Any sale is essentially irrelevant to whether or not the building is deemed a dangerous building. The designation runs with the building and the land, so regardless of if it gets sold, that designation does not go away. It would require demolition or someone to bring it up to code in order to make any difference in that regard. So the city would ask Chief Building Official and Building Inspections Director Brandon Baselug. He will be offering some testimony to council.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just real briefly, I've been before you, we've talked about this a few times, answered some questions, but what I'd really like to do is go back to the April timeframe and give you just a high-level synopsis of how we got to where we are. So middle of April, we received the Grand Forks PD received a complaint from a tenant within the Ambassador Motel. In order to follow up on that complaint, the officer directed that towards my staff. They came to me looking for direction, asked them to go out. They did take out at that time a fire marshal and somebody from Public Health to look at it. They were not able to go through the whole building. They just addressed the actual complaint in itself, and that complaint at the time was ADA access. They did see that there was a lot of egress issues, identified some other fire issues, whether it was a smoke detector hanging, doors that didn't necessarily open, and I believe even some doors that were locked shut. So in turn, that created more conversation, what should we do next? Staff from building inspections reached out to the trustee and the manager of the Ambassador. They went to or set up a time to do an overall inspection of the whole building. At that point in time, it was members of the Building Inspections Department, Fire Marshal Hageman, Fire Marshal Getz, as well as Mike Quigley from Public Health. And they went through and they each looked at it from their individual perspective. Fire looked at it from the aspect of the Fire and Life Safety Code. Building's a little bit different. The building inspectors don't necessarily look at what the code says right now. They're looking at just overall condition. A lot of the code talks or adjoins one another between the building code and the fire codes. Looking at access issues, looking at smoke detectors, again, what they originally found, but just going a little bit more in depth. And Public Health was there from the aspect of what they do, public health, and looking at the rooms themselves. They all came back. What you see is attached to my first affidavit that went forth before the court. And as I got those reports, we decided we need to do something. City code allows the department heads to get together, or the department head staff to bring that report forth. They brought it to me. We had a conversation, myself, the fire chief, Javen Bedard, who's the environmental manager with Public Health, and what are our next steps? You can see clearly in there several fire violations, several pages of fire violations. I mean, that's the first thing we look at when we're operating a motel, hotel, any type of business in the city of Grand Forks. First and foremost is to keep our tenants safe, keep our visitors safe, and by also doing that, we're protecting the owners themselves. There was a gamut of issues found, and so we went through the code. What's our next step? Well, the next step was to abate the building. Basically, put together a letter, identify that this is a dangerous building. It was deemed dangerous because we had people living and occupying a building, number one, that simply put, did not have a working smoke alarm system that would notify the individuals. Fire requires that the smoke alarm systems are able to talk down to dispatch or have the ability of somebody with 24/7 in front of that monitoring system. They've changed, over the past couple of years, they've changed that and say, no, it has to be a system that talks to one of the monitoring companies. This one wasn't doing that. So, I mean, that's an immediate red flag. And as we kept going through and watching, we dissected the report from the fire marshals. First, we dissected that. I went through with my staff. Okay, what does this look like? What does this look like? They all gave recommendations to me. In the end, the recommendation was it is a dangerous building, not necessarily dangerous from the aspect of a structural dangerous. So when you hear the context of this is a dangerous building, that doesn't mean that it's a structural building that's going to fall down. It's dangerous to the public. It's dangerous to our first responders, and it's dangerous for people to occupy that building. So a letter was set forth to Mr. McGregor as the trustee dated April 8th. We sat down, myself, the fire chief, and representatives from public health on April 9th, I believe, and visited with them, went through the letter, and here's what we need to do. We have to get these people out of here immediately. We had a little bit of leeway with that. It was a Friday. Said, we'll give it till Monday, get the folks out, at least be able to speak with them. I had staff go out, post, and visit with the individuals out there, why we were doing this, and then we just kept moving through the phases. And that's why we're here right now. There was never any conversations we did put in the original document that was given to Mr. McGregor as trustee is, if you can sit down and decide that you want to make the fixes, we'll certainly work with you to bring the building up to code. There were never any conversations of that matter. And then in addition, you'll see in that letter that this was a building operating within the city of Grand Forks that really wasn't deemed a motel. It wasn't licensed in the city of Grand Forks. We went the other route, the life safety route, to abate the building, and that's what brings us here today. This is the end of the abatement process in the city code that's adopted by city council, and it's deemed a dangerous building. And what we're asking is that you agree with us that it's deemed a dangerous building, and we just have the ability to move forward with our process. Any questions for me, Mayor, City Council?
Mr. Baselug, in Exhibit 2, paragraph 9, on page 2 of 3, you list 6 different areas that led you to conclude that this was an imminent danger to life, health, property, and safety of the occupants, and renders the property unsafe. From my reading, the first 5 of those items would deal more directly with inhabitants or any individuals in the building. It's only the 6th that refers to a general public nuisance of the building. To Mr. McGregor's request that this be tabled, if all of these are, if most of these are about the imminent danger to inhabitants, and there's no one in the building, how much of a danger is the building without inhabitants at this time?
I would say without inhabitants, there's little to no danger there. Where you look at that is if somebody gets in there, we have it boarded shut now, or the trustee, they have it boarded shut. If somebody gets in there, we don't know about it, and a fire of some sort starts, so therefore the danger comes where we're putting our first responders in danger, or we're putting our any other citizen that decides to go in there that nobody knows about. So you can speculate that there's nobody in there. They've been going over the last couple of days getting things out, but to say that there's not anybody in there, I don't know. Yeah, you have to balance that a little bit. So there's most certainly still is a danger if the chief's department, they get a phone call, or PD responds. Everybody's going to respond to that, and if there's a missing board on the outside by a door, most likely going to make the assumption that somebody's in there, and then they're going to go in.
Have to go into a dangerous building.
Yeah, so that's where the danger to the public comes from.
Very good.
We have tenants out, but there's still that aspect of you don't know. You can say they're not in there, but possibly somebody's in there, or what danger does that put our folks in?
Boarded up, but boards can be moved,
Yep.
removed. Not fenced off at this time.
Not at this time. What we've done is we actually just, we have some garbage cans with sandbags. We put signs saying, no trespassing. We did not fence it off. Typically, in a demo process, it would get fenced off.
Very good, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, Mayor, council members?
Oh, yes, Ms. Mock?
So in terms of finding the building dangerous, does that mean that the owner could still sell the land as part of the sale? Or should we be asking more questions about the details of that proposed offer to see if it's
I'm
the
gonna-
land and not the sale of the building?
I'm thinking that's a question that Ms. Broughton probably should be directed towards her.
Yeah, the dangerous building designation, that doesn't impact Mr. McGregor's ability to sell the building, sell the land. That designation, however, does follow, so the subsequent purchaser would still be dealing with the dangerous building designation until something was done.
Okay. But he could still sell the land?
Correct.
Okay.
I believe it also, in this aspect of it, if it was sold, basically, in my office, it would still follow the same direction, so I'd have to work with the new owner to say, here's where we are. If you want to fix it up, we need to sit down, here's what needs to be done per code, or a decision needs to be made on the hindsight that it would be demoed.
Thank you, and then they will have the order, we'll be able to ask further questions on the order too at the end, I believe, so, perfect. Any other questions from Mr. Baseflug? All right, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Baseflug.
And just one thing to add, Mr. Weber, you had a question is to the safety. The April 23rd fire did occur once the tenants had vacated the premises, and so that safety concern still does exist, because we did have first responders going and extinguishing the fire. So it certainly still poses that risk of harm to the public.
That's very helpful. Also, do we know, has the state fire marshal concluded their investigation? Not at this time.
I will probably defer that to Chief Lorenz, and he can step forward to the podium, and he'll be the next one to provide testimony to
Very good.
council.
Thank you, Ms. Broughton.
Good evening, Mayor Buchenski, Councilman Weber, member of the council. To answer your question, Councilman Weber, they have not concluded. They are working in conjunction with the Grand Forks Police Department on that investigation. I spoke to the State Fire Marshal today, and at this point, the report has not been completed.
Thank you, Chief.
Take off from where Brandon was talking about their process. I'll just talk a little bit about the fire side of it and summarize that a little bit in detail. In your exhibit, you saw affidavits from Fire Marshals Hageman and Getz that went in to inspect on March 31st and then again on April 2nd. And then in Exhibit 2, there's a list of the fire code violations. And I guess to summarize on our determination on what that made a dangerous building, if you look at some of the things and think about the context of that building, this was a motel with people sleeping in it at nighttime. We had sleeping units with missing or non-functioning smoke detectors. You had an alarm system that hadn't had its annual test. It was not being monitored, as Brandon said, is adopted by the fire code to be monitored by a third-party vendor. And then also the basement had substantial combustibles piled down there, including styrofoam that have been glued to the walls, uncovered styrofoam, which is a flammable product. And then the basement of that facility had an open wood flooring truss system, non-sprinklered, with the amount of combustibles, improperly discarded smoking materials, along with the amount of combustibles, and the fact that you had sleeping rooms with an unmonitored, unverified operational alarm system with missing smoke detectors. That's what proved to me that this was a dangerous building. You had people, that could have been directly above a fire and wouldn't have known it. Granted, the fire that did occur on April 23rd did not start in the basement, started on the first floor. Structurally, as Brandon said, the building was not at risk of falling down in no way, shape, or form. But the amount of materials that were in the basement, along with blocked exiting, we had egress doors with padlocks from the outside, other items blocking the egress paths besides is what made the determination for this to be a dangerous building. And then subsequently, the fire on April 23rd, we responded, the fire department extinguished the fire quickly, and then solicited the assistance of the State Fire Marshal's office for conducting the investigation. Does anyone have any questions for me?
All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that, to the best of our knowledge, none of the conditions have changed since the time all those affidavits had been filed with the court. Like I said, to our knowledge, none of those conditions have been remedied, so we believe that the condition at the time still remains today. And with that, unless council has questions, the city would turn it back over to Mr. McGregor for any final remarks that he might have.
Yeah, I have a few. I don't think we're necessarily objecting to the fact that the ambassador probably should be taken down. I'm objecting to the fact that very little time has been given to effectuate anything like a sale without the possibility that the city could put a damper on a sale by immediately requiring that within 7 days, someone is supposed to demolish the building, which I think probably would be physically impossible in Grand Forks at this time. We're not arguing against the fact that it needs to be done, and I do not appreciate the fact that it's also such a dangerous building. I mean, I guess my house would be a dangerous building if someone went downstairs and started a fire in my, I don't know, somewhere in the basement and the place burnt down. It would be dangerous to the firefighters, to the people that live there, me and my wife and kids. It's the same, there's no one living there. We could hire someone to walk the floors every night if we wanted to. The problems could be all ameliorated if given a little bit of time. I'm just saying that if the city goes ahead and does this, it makes no sense. It could hurt the sale of the property, which would mean that it wouldn't be developed properly, just like it's intended to be. And under the agreement we have right now, with people known to the city of Grand Forks, if we're given additional time to get this done, it'll be up to them. They will demolish it. They've already told us they're going to do that. But to force us into this and to go with I'm not even sure what you call it, with the demolition requirement, to me, makes no sense. We're not disagreeing with what has been said here. We disagree with the timing and the fact that we're not given enough time to get the new buyer a chance to do what he's going to do, or they are going to do. So, I mean, if you want to hurt us and perhaps this deal, I would say then you go ahead and require the demolition, but I don't think it's a good matter for the city of Grand Forks. I've been here a long time myself. I'm a business guy. Business-wise, it doesn't make sense to do it. So all I'm saying is we'd like to get a little bit more time to effectuate the sale and move on, and you'll be dealing with people that the city knows and has dealt with before, and they'll be able to take the building down and do whatever they're going to do with the property. So all I'm saying is it's not a good decision to make if you're going to go ahead and do this. Not now, give us a little time, and it'll take care of itself. Otherwise, we could hire a guy to walk the floors and make sure nobody's in there. Then I don't know how it could be a dangerous building. It's well-built, as I said. If someone walks the floors every night, like they do at the State Mill, probably not going to have any problem. No one would be in danger. So just give us a little time, not even long. I would imagine the agreement would be signed in a day or two, and the city will be able to deal with the new buyers. I can give you the name of them if someone requests, but the people at the city, I believe, know who they are. So they told me that today. So that's all I have to say.
Mr. McGregor, just in case there might be a couple questions. And I know you maybe haven't had a chance to read the order, but the order would allow you to tear it down or the prospective new owner to tear it down under a certain length of time, which I think they're going to go through.
7 days, I believe it was, yeah.
Well, it's listed on 27. Why don't we go through it first, and I think it'll be helpful because it's not as, I think you're understanding it is more immediate than what is going to be written in this order. Maybe Ella, if you want to wait till we go through the order, or maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, we can certainly, I mean, if Mr. McGregor has nothing further, that would conclude the presentation of testimony and evidence, and we can start going through the order.
I think, let's go through questions first, 'cause I think Mr. Weigel had a question.
Mr. McGregor, when was the last time the fire alarm system was inspected?
When was it effective?
Inspected, yes.
Inspected? I don't remember.
When's the last time the fire alarm reported normal conditions?
I don't remember either.
Okay. When's the last time extension cords were not being used as permanent wiring?
I don't think they have been in a long time.
Okay. And so what I'm reading off is Exhibit 2. And I understand you want time, but we can't answer any of these questions when some of this stuff worked. And I understand you want to sell the property, but we've had time. You've owned this building for quite some time, or the trust has at that point. None of this stuff has gotten fixed. I just don't understand how...
Well, to be honest with you, the monitoring system is new with the city. It just came about, I don't know exactly when. I'd already started calling Stones Mobile to arrange the monitoring of it. It's new to us. It's not something we could have done 3 years ago because I'd never heard of it then. 2 years ago, I'd never heard of it. So that's not an issue really with that part of it. I don't think they were monitored very well, but the main system, we had Simplex doing the monitoring of it. Whenever we got calls, we called them. And we were supposed to put in the new system. We had already put in the new, I ordered, like the 10 hallway alarms were already ordered and put up, but the monitoring hadn't done yet because Stones Mobile hadn't come back to us yet.
When's the last time you had a hotel or motel license with the city of Grand Forks?
We took it over, when we took it over, the place was being rented on a 30-day basis, which is why, to begin with, the gentleman who turned the motel over, he was one who we tried to get to go somewhere else, and no other agency in town would take him, okay? That's the first thing that happened. And secondly, we don't have anyone to go through and clean the rooms. They're paid for on a 30-day basis. We do not change sheets. We do not go into their rooms to check on anything. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but we're trying to monitor the system. I'm not sure why that makes a difference at this point, but it could. I don't know what else you need to know.
I guess my point...
I don't get involved in the day-to-day operations. That's the only thing. I really don't.
Yeah, and I understand, but I guess my main point would be is we've had a lot of time. This building at times has had issues. It continues to have issues. I do think it's a dangerous building. I think you said that yourself. I'd hate to see it hurt the sale of the building, but at the same time, this process has been going on for months.
Yeah, but that's true, but making it a requirement by this order for 7-day demolition would affect the sale, or could affect the sale of the building, and someone new coming in, taking it down and putting up something, I don't know what they're going to put up, but they're going to put up something and it's going to be good for the city, I would guess. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McGregor, have there been, we've heard from city staff that there have been no significant efforts to change the condition of the building. Have there been any efforts to change the condition of the building?
Well, since the fire, or since the inspection, you mean?
Sure.
Yeah, we did a lot. We took down the styrofoam, which, to be honest with you, I took home and I couldn't get it to burn, but maybe if I hire hotter fire, it does burn. I don't know. I threw it on my fire.
You took down the styrofoam. Any other things that you did in there?
Well, we cleaned out a lot of the clutter that was there, and the manager did have way too much stored down there, but you have to remember, the basement, no one's allowed down there but the manager. Basically, he's the only one. There's no one living there. There's no one that goes down there. It's locked at all times, although sometimes it has been broken into a few times.
Very good.
People trying to steal stuff.
Frankly,
But
sir,
on a regular basis, there's no one there. Never was.
Okay. That doesn't sound like significant changes to the building. Can you help us to understand how a delay in the order of demolition might affect the sale?
Well, if the gentlemen who are buying it were to take it down themselves at their own pace, not their own pace, I shouldn't say that. They intend to do it quickly, but if the city were to be involved, it would create some legal headaches. It might create additional costs to them because the city does their thing, and usually they take a profit on it, to my understanding. And other than that, I don't know they haven't talked to me about what happens if the city approves this, but I know it's not going to help anything, and it could hurt it.
Okay. So my understanding is, Ms. Broughton, there was no motel license?
That's correct. There was no hotel motel license, and there wasn't a certificate of occupancy either. So it really is operating in kind of a gray area where it's not licensed as anything at this point.
And no landlord license, obviously, either?
Correct.
Right.
There has been no license since I got there, and there never was before that. The city had not required anything. I didn't know when I called the police if they would be able to evict anybody or not.
But you were charging people rent without any license?
30-day rent, yeah. It had gone on for years before we got there. We just continued the old way, assuming that it was okay.
I would hope that after this, that we'll have a discussion about putting in place some sort of mechanism to address flagrant violations of this sort, but
The only
that's
way,
another discussion.
we had a choice. We could call the police, but if we called them, they said, well, you've got 30-day rentals, so we can't throw anybody out of your motel, even if they're causing whatever. And on the other hand, it worked as if we were a motel, but it's a long story, but nevertheless, we didn't really ever have anyone tell us that we didn't have a license, didn't have anything.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
We
Burke.
continued what they were doing prior to us,
Thank you, sir.
so.
Ms. Dockler?
Mr. McGregor, would you mind sharing who the buyer is that you're speaking with?
Yeah, I guess I can do that. I talked to them, they said it was okay. Excuse me, I just gotta, hold on a second. It's Bluebird and Blue Star Investments LLP. And I believe they said they've been talking to the city already, and I believe the city knows of them. And they told me it was okay if I identified them. And we do intend to sign within a few days. To be honest, I just cannot see that it's not going to change anything in the past. I can't see where the city requiring immediate demolition is going to help anything. And it would help us and probably save some trouble with the paperwork, a few other things if we just were allowed to do it, or that the new people are allowed to do it their way. I believe they know how to demolish buildings and do their thing themselves without the city being involved. And so that's why I'm just asking simply for that. I don't see any good coming of this being done, but I can see some harm that could possibly come from it if their immediate demolition were required.
Any further questions for Mr. McGregor? All right, thank you, sir. Ella, I think it'd be good now to go through the order, because I think a lot of his concerns will be addressed in the order itself.
Yes, and Mr. McGregor has stated that, he doesn't contest the fact that demolition is appropriate under these circumstances, and I think as we go through this, it will alleviate some of his concerns regarding that, the immediacy and how quickly demolition will have to occur. So we'll just go kind of paragraph by paragraph. I won't read it verbatim, but just giving a summary of what's in here. And it's just important to note that the order isn't my order. It's not the city attorney's order. This has to be city council's order. And so if there are any corrections that need to be made, or if you feel that something needs to be changed, you can let us know and we'll make those corrections, because at the end of the day, this is your order and not ours. So we'll begin. Paragraph 1 basically just says that this matter came before City Council based on an appeal from the city engineer's demolition order. Paragraph 2 basically refers to Mr. McGregor. He has the ownership interest, and so he's the appropriate party to be involved in this, and he has an interest in the Ambassador Motel. Paragraph 3 talks about Mr. McGregor's appeal, June 11th appeal of the demolition order. Paragraph 4 is City Council's determination of having the appeal hearing today. Paragraph 5 is that a formal notice of hearing was provided to Mr. McGregor via personal service. Paragraph 6 basically talks about that a hearing was held today, June 21st, and that the parties were present. Paragraph 7 begins kind of a list of the exhibits that were presented or that provided to you today. The first set were documents that were filed in the underlying City of Grand Forks versus McGregor District Court case. So those are exhibits 1 through 10. And then going on the demolition order, the affidavit, basically just outlining all the exhibits that were provided to you. Paragraph 8 provides that you received exhibits, you heard testimony, and thereby issue the following findings of fact and conclusions of law. Paragraph 9, again, summarizes that this matter arises out of a complaint of an occupant, a disabled occupant of the Ambassador. Paragraph 10, upon receiving the complaint, this is kind of going into the factual basis for what happened. So that the inspections, or Fire Department, Grand Forks Public Health, city inspections conducted an inspection. They noted various violations. Paragraph 11 was a subsequent inspection by Fire Marshal Matt Hagman. Paragraph 12 discusses the public health concerns that were noted during the inspection. Paragraph 13, the inspection or the property is in violation of city code as a result of it not being, like we said, licensed as a hotel or possessing a certificate of occupancy. Paragraph 14, after consideration of the findings of the respective departments, Mr. Baseflug determined that collectively the violations rendered the property a dangerous building and unsafe for habitation for the reasons listed there. Paragraph 15 discusses how Mr. Baseflug delivered to Mr. McGregor a letter dated April 8th with the citations to the city code violations, also requiring the tenants vacate within 48 hours due to the imminent health and safety hazards. Paragraph 16 talks about the city attorney's office filing its motion for temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction and supporting documents. Paragraph 17 is where the district court issued the temporary restraining order. Paragraph 18 discusses the April 23rd fire and what was determined after that fire as far as the existing danger of the building. Paragraph 19 again talks about what happened after the fire as far as boarding up the windows, the doors, that the overall condition of the building became considerably worse. Paragraph 20 discusses the hearing that was held at the Grand Forks County Courthouse for the preliminary injunction. Paragraph 21 discusses the district court's issuance of the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and order for preliminary injunction that restrained all persons from occupying, residing, or staying in the property. Paragraph 22 talks about the city engineer issuing the order of demolition. Paragraph 23 discusses Mr. McGregor's appeal of the demolition order. And paragraph 24 finds that City Council finds substantial evidence exists that the property is a dangerous building as defined in the city code and that demolition of the property is warranted. Paragraph 25 just summarizes that based on the foregoing documents and upon motion properly made, seconded and carried, is hereby ordered. So then we get to kind of the actual order or the substance there. where city council would affirm the city engineer's order for demolition, and this is the piece that will address Mr. McGregor's concerns, is that Mr. McGregor, shall demolish the property as soon as practicable, but no later than the date and time determined by the chief building official, building inspections director Brandon Baseflug. So there is no specific set time there. That's a time to be determined by Mr. Baseflug. Paragraph 28 is that Mr. Baseflug shall provide notice to Mr. McGregor of the date in which the demolition of the property would be completed. And paragraph 29 is that in the event Mr. McGregor fails to comply with the order, the city basically can go in without further notice to Mr. McGregor, demolish the building, and then those costs would be assessed by special assessment against the property.
Thank you. I think we'll start with probably the most obvious question is to Mr. Baseflug. What do you expect that time frame to be?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, if you were going to ask me today to give you a date on when we can demo the building, it's going to start quite a process if the city goes through it, where I have to go through bids, et cetera, and it'd be the same thing on the private side. I think what I'd like to do is come to an agreement. We know that this is a dangerous building. We know it needs to come down and be able to work with the trustee where it doesn't impact, as he stated, could impact economic development or economic growth within the city. So to work, whether that's, if it can be done sooner than later, great, but I don't think we're just going to snap our fingers and a building is going to come down without working with other individuals and getting pricing and things like that. So ideal date is tomorrow. It's not going to happen though. It's, there's some time there, and I think I'm willing to listen to council on direction, and yourself, Mr. Mayor, on if you're willing to give some of that time, and I think we base it from that.
So ideally, this order is in the hopes that it will be demolished by Mr. McGregor or whoever purchases the building in a time frame that, working with you feel is a reasonable time frame before you have to step in and do it as as the order allows in item 29. Would that roughly be what we're looking at? I don't know if that's for Ella or for you.
I think that's a Ms. Broughton question.
Yeah, basically, I mean, the sooner the better. This is a dangerous building for all the reasons that have been talked about today. Obviously, the court has determined also that it is a dangerous building. We do have the preliminary injunction is just that, it's preliminary, it's not permanent, and so we only have 180 days to basically get this resolved. Otherwise, there will be a trial on the matter, which I believe would be scheduled before October 19th. So there certainly needs to be a resolution before that time.
Okay, and then I guess the last question I have, and I'll open it up. If this building is sold, this order would carry with the actual property. So, it says Mr. McGregor's name, but it would be along with the title of the property?
The dangerous building designation stays with the property.
Okay, so regardless if we waited and then did this order, with a new buyer, I mean, this needs to happen and needs to be set into motion?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions from council regarding the order? Mr. Sandy, please.
Just a general comment. Ms. Broughton, I appreciate what you said when we started this hearing and the fact that you didn't provide these documents to us before the meeting started. But I'm feeling like I'm a little bit behind the eight ball, because although Mr. Weber apparently can read really fast and managed to get those 6 points quickly, I still haven't read any of this documentation, and I feel a little bit remiss knowing that these are Mr. McGregor's personal property rights, and I take this very seriously, which I'm sure we all do, right? And so I want to say, hey, give me 20 minutes so I can read all of this and let's have a little quiet time here, but I'm not sure that everyone in the audience is interested in that. So I'm not really sure what to do, which is why when Mr. McGregor suggested he wants a little more time, the first thing I thought was, well, can we move this hearing to next week? And then within this week, he can get a purchase agreement signed, and then we can move on. Or we can have the hearing and whomever is eventually going to be the property owners can agree to whatever we say. I know it probably doesn't matter. I understand that. But I also feel like we owe it to him to be fully educated on all of the documents that are in front of us. So I'm happy to take 7 minutes and read through all of this right now, if people are okay with that. If they don't want to do that, I'm okay pushing until next week, whatever everyone else is interested in.
Mr. Weber?
Mr. Gaustad, I've never seen us do this, but this is an unusual circumstance. Is there such a thing as a recess?
The council can move to go into recess if you want, to give you time to review the documents. It is a lot of information that was presented eloquently by Ms. Broughton. The one thing that I think is important is I don't think Mr. McGregor is disagreeing with the conclusion that it's a dangerous building. And so all of the factual findings, I think, are an accurate depiction. And the factual findings are things that were accepted by a district court judge with respect to seeking the restraining order. That's how we got them, got the restraining order to begin with. And so if the concern is by Mr. McGregor that, gee, I'd like to have my buyer demolish the property, which, as I understood his testimony, is exactly what the intention is here. I'm selling it to destroy the property. All you're doing then is putting that to the test. If that's your intention, then let's issue the order, give him the time to allow for the private parties to effectuate their sale, which they can do. And you know, I don't want to speak for Mr. Baseflug as to how long it's going to take to get this done, but it would seem logical to me, and I think Mr. McGregor is somewhat confused with the 7-day parameter, because that's what our ordinance says, is that when the order for demolition comes out from the engineer, it says it can't be any longer than 7 days for the demolition order. That's why the appeal rights exist. It would seem logical to me that it's going to be probably a 30 to 60-day period of time for something to get, you know, once we get the bidding process and get everything put together in order to accomplish that demolition. That seems to me gives Mr. McGregor sufficient time to sign a purchase agreement, do all the due diligence that's necessary for a purchase, to do the title work, whatever is necessary, and to get that done. If it's not done within that time period, what the order says is then where the city will come in and demolish the property. So I think the way the order is crafted is it gives flexibility with city staff to be able to accomplish that with Mr. McGregor and set an end date. It has to be demolished by a certain date. And if you don't, if your buyer doesn't get that accomplished by that date, then the city will come in and demolish it.
Mr. Weber, continue.
So I believe Mr. Gaustad's answer to my question was yes, we could go into recess. However, he also stated there's no contesting the facts here. I asked Mr. McGregor if there have been any significant efforts to change the condition of the building. I'm not hearing that there have been. I do not understand how a delay in the order of demolition would affect the sale in any way. So I'm prepared to make a motion that council move forward with the order of demolition. But I appreciate any coaching on making the motion, a proper motion.
That was a proper motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we got a motion from Mr. Weber. Do we have a second?
Second.
We got a second from Mr. Weigel. Any further comment this time? Yeah, Ms. Mock, please.
If I'm understanding correctly, though, we need to define when the demolition would need to occur. Is that correct? Because I think we need to be fair to the property owner to give him a certain window, and then at that time, if it didn't occur, then the city would take over the process.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And we intentionally left it more open-ended to allow Mr. Baseflug to make a determination as to the timeframe and to encourage then communication between Mr. McGregor and Mr. Baseflug to mutually set a time parameter as to when that could be accomplished. And knowing that, you know, at some point, if they can't come to the agreement, Mr. Baseflug would obviously have to set a date certain to get this accomplished by. certainly the council could set a date if you wanted to and modify the order if you wanted to.
Okay, so we could leave it open-ended for them to determine together. Perhaps we should
Yeah, Mr.
kind of
Mayor.
give him an idea of when that might be.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Mock, members of council, I would rather leave it the way it is, sit down with Mr. McGregor. We can get into more into context on what the intent is. You know, as Mr. Gossett had spoke, that 60-day timeframe, I think that, I'm thinking that in my head when I sit down with him, hey, within 60 days. Most certainly we want it before October 19th because we do have an order sitting in district court. Or we don't want to go to trial or anything. We know that it's been agreed upon. We have a dangerous building. So I think this order allows the latitude for me to sit down with Mr. McGregor and or any of the heirs that are in the trust and say, when can we get this done? And rather than just putting a date, it's got to be done next week. That'll just bring us back here again. So be able to have the conversations with the trustee and or the new owners that may be coming on board. We'll get it done.
Sounds good. I got Mr. McGregor, can we ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you reading this, maybe we don't, maybe this is not going to be, maybe you can live with this the way that it's written and work with that, get the sale done, they can tear it down, everybody can at least come away with this, not pleased, but to some finality. I mean, how are you feeling after getting to read the way the order is stated?
To be honest, this is the first I've seen of this unless I missed it in what was served. But I wasn't aware that in the back on the last page, Yeah, I was not aware. I got this packet today from the attorney, and it may have been served to me before, but I did not read the last paragraph or whatever, I don't know. But it says, McGregor shall demolish the property as soon as practicable and no later than the date and time determined by the chief inspector for the city. I had not seen that before. So depending upon what he says, it makes a difference. But as a practical matter, I don't really see too much of a major problem with this requirement as long as we're given some time like we will be in this last statement. I did not see this before. I was handed the whole packet at the meeting here today, but I may have received it before. All I'm saying is that it's acceptable to me as long as we have time to work with it, and he can work with the new buyers. So I really don't have a problem with this one at all.
Sounds good. I really appreciate it, Mr. McGregor. And thank you for your time and coming in here today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mr. Bean?
Yeah, just a couple comments here. I agree with Mr. Sandy on the short time frame we have, that I probably don't quite understand and haven't read through everything that's here. But on the same token, if I heard appropriately, there's not an issue here with Mr. McGregor. So if this was maybe contested or something like that, I might ask for more time, but if everybody's in agreement, then I'm ready to vote on the motion.
Mr. Sandy?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just for general process, I understand what you were going for. I still feel a little uncomfortable moving forward, not having read the documents. But on the other side of that, these are affidavits and people are swearing that what the information is true. And so I'm going to take it on their word that they're providing true and accurate information, in which case I'm also ready to move forward. And I also have verified via text that the potential buyer is planning on tearing it down as quickly as possible. So that makes me comfortable as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure, Mr. Weber.
And I don't know if this is for Ms. Broughton, Mr. Phelan, or Mr. Baselug. City Code Chapter 21, Article 11, that requires some certificate of occupancy. We don't have the resources to go around and police every building on a regular basis to determine whether that's in place or not. But in the meantime, we have individuals living in unacceptable housing in our town. What can be done What needs to be done to strengthen some sort, or create some sort of enforcement mechanism for 21 Article 11?
Councilman Weber, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this precise question, very similar, was brought up by Councilwoman Dockler, where we've been having some conversations about housing and issues such as this. We do have a rental program that goes hand in hand with certificate of occupancies when it comes to apartments. What we're doing is we're basically doing a complete reset on that. It's broken, if you will. We're digging deep into it. Staff's looking at how can we make this better and stronger, not only for our tenants that are renting and or living in the city of Grand Forks, but also for those owners, and to identify. And if you ask what my vision was, my vision is not to go and say this is a bad building, let's take it down. My vision is to work with these property owners and how can we make it look better? How can we help you, rather than going from the enforcement aspect, utilize it in the education aspect and working with them. So we're currently in that process. We're just in the infant stages right now. We do have a rental program that goes through this. You are correct, and when you related that we can't identify every CO, we don't have the resources to go through each one each year, but we do have mechanisms for businesses where the fire department is identifying the businesses that have permits. They may talk back and forth to us, do they have a CO, vice versa. We try to monitor it within our systems, but it's big. It's a big picture to try to get your hands around, but we are working on it and recreating that process, and once we get deep into it, I'll bring a report back to council.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Basewig. And Councilmember Dockler, thanks for that work as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Just procedurally, is Mr. Kavami on the line? Was his vote, Mr. Kavami, are you there? So I believe it was a 6-0 vote without Mr. Kavami. All right. Moving on to 3 public hearings and second readings of ordinances.
3.1, public hearing and second reading of an ordinance relating to amend Grand Forks City Code, Sections 21-0201, 21-0206, 21-0207, 0211, 20-0221, and 21-0225, relating to various language cleanup relating to alcohol licensing.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to open up the public hearing for item 3.1. Anyone wishing to speak on item 3.1? No, public hearing is closed. I'll open up to comments or motions from council. Mr. Weigel, got a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Sandy. Any further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3.1 carries.
3.2, public hearing and second reading of ordinance to amend Grand Forks City Code Section 21-0228 relating to minors on premise.
Thank you, Mr. Gosta. That included, do you want to, just anything that had been changed from the last reading, can you just show us that section?
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, just so you're aware, hopefully it shows up, anything that's in red were the additions or changes that were discussed at during the first reading, and that would be in 21-0228, 2E. Where it references minors working in Class 1 alcoholic beverage locations, 16 years of age, provided that they can't work before 9 a.m. or after 10 p.m. As I was looking at it, I thought these would be additional conditions along with the other conditions that already exist for somebody working underage that exist in subsection C, for example. The only other change was the from and after effective date for a couple of the ordinances changes that were a result of state statutes. It was kind of a scrivener's error on my part, so.
Thank you, Mr. Goss. I'm going to open up the public hearing for item 3.2. Public hearing is closed. Do we have questions or comments or motions? We had a motion to approve from Mr. Sandy, second from Mr. Veen. All those, any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 3.2 carries.
3.3, public hearing and second reading of an ordinance amending Grand Forks City Code Section 21-0214 and 21-0224 relating to delivery of alcoholic beverages.
Thank you. And Mr. Gossett, About the only feedback I got on any of these ordinances was just one feedback, and I actually really agree with the feedback that I received. And if council agrees, I'd like to remove in section B 11.2 regarding liquor and spirits. I don't think that was really the intention of the order to begin with. So if you could just, I guess, highlight that section, or if council wants to take a look at that, and would motion to approve with that. I think it would appease at least the person that had
Sure.
reached out.
Thank you, Mayor. It's the quantity of alcohol that can be delivered in any single delivery. The amounts that are listed there are actually 50% of what is currently in the emergency order. The emergency order did actually allow for 750 milliliters of spirits, and so I reduced that to 375 milliliters. And the comments that I received too was to request that be removed. And so if you were going to approve this particular ordinance change, it would be, and you were in agreement with that particular removal, it would be subsection, or 210224.
Section B 11.2.
Yeah, B11.
Or 11D, yeah,
Yep.
11D.
Would be remove that quantity in total, so that would not be an allowable, you wouldn't be able to deliver any, I guess, hard liquor with the delivery, other than being in a mixed drink.
Yeah, I'll move approval with the elimination of 11D.
Thank you, Mr. Sad. Do we have a second? Mr. Weber seconds. Any further comments? Concerns? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion 3.3 carries.
3.4, public hearing and second reading of an ordinance amending Grand Forks City Code, Section 9-0404 relating to charitable gaming, and Section 21-0205 related to classifications of alcohol licenses.
Thank you. I think we had a really good conversation on this item at the last council meeting. So I'll again open up the public hearing for 3.4 at this time. All right, the public hearing is closed. Any motions or comments from council?
Move approval.
Motion to approve from Mr. Weigel. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Weber. Any further comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
I believe it, we've got, was that a 4-2 vote? Do you want to run that one? Who is this? Could you run that one, Maureen, please?
Yep, we'll
Thanks.
do a roll call vote. Weigel,
Aye.
Doppler,
Nay.
Weber. That was an aye? Aye. Mock? No. Kavami, are you on? Okay, Sandy? Aye. And Veen?
Aye.
Motion passes. I have 4-2.
Thank you. 3.4 carries.
All right. 3.5 then, public hearing and second reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning map to rezone and exclude from the R4 multifamily residence high-density district and to include with the B3 general business district lots 2 and 4, block 7, Villards addition.
Thank you. Open up 3.5 to public hearing. Public hearing period is closed. Any motions, comments, questions from council? Got a motion to approve from Mr. Sandy, second from Mr. Weigel, excuse me. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. 3.5 carries.
3.6, public hearing and second reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 18 Land Development Code to include downtown design standards.
Thank you. And Ms. Edwardsons, I believe there were some changes, so you wanted to highlight that to council.
Correct. Between preliminary and final, we did have a couple amendments, mostly relating to the sign section of the code as well as the outdoor seating. The sign section, we added specific parameters, set certain square footages, different allowances for exterior lighting. Can go through the specifics if you'd like, or can just run through it. Outdoor seating, we clarified the permits eligible all year for an annual renewal, and as well as some other corrections from the city's attorney's office. So with that, those were the corrections between preliminary and final. If you have any other questions relating to the bulk of the ordinance, be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Edwardson? Mr. Weber, please.
I'll move approval.
The motion to approve, second. Second from Ms. Dockler. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. 3.6 carries unanimously. Moving on to 4 action items. Since 4.1 wasn't heard in the cow, I think we need to bring that, to pull that, 4.6 and 4.7. Any other items that would like to be pulled? Ms. Dockler?
4.5, please.
4.5. Any other items from council? All right, we're going to move to approve the rest of the items, then the introduction of the ordinances, then we'll get back to 4.1, 4.5, 4.6, and 4.7. So I'd look for a motion to approve 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.8, 4.9, 4.10, 4.11, 4.12, 4.13, 4.14, 4.16, and 4.19. Get a motion from Mr. Weber.
Second.
Second from, was that Ms. Dockler? Sorry. Okay, second from Ms. Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those motions carry. Now I'm going to look to introduce, motion to introduce an ordinance for 4.15, 4.17, and 4.18. Could I get a motion from council? We'll get a motion from Ms. Mock, second from Mr. Veen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those motions carry.
Okay, 4.1, Northern Plains Nitrogen Letter of Intent Renewal.
Mr. Phelan.
Mayor Buczynski, members of the City Council, I didn't put this on the committee of the whole last week. I'm sorry, I had a meeting conflict, but we have, in recent years, we've moved this forward 6 months in advance, so I am asking for at least one more time to do that. I have been in contact with Mr. Mackey, who's the CEO of Northern Plains Nitrogen, and again, Mr. Mackey has been in front of you, and what he's told me is a similar message or communication is that they continue to work on the investment side and things progress positive. We've talked about that. I also followed up with, importantly, the JDA, the Jobs Development Growth Fund, is helping to fund a plume analysis update. So I did follow up with Mr. Schauer, who, as part of the KLJ study, they are updating that. And his message to me is they anticipate the model being updated here in this following July, and with kind of a finalization of that probably likely by the end of September. So what he has said is that generally we facilitated Mr. Schauer and his team to engage with all the partners and to get all their factors that they wanted evaluated, and so there's been a lot of engagement with Grand Forks Airport Authority and all their tenants, University of North Dakota, City of Grand Forks, and the Grand Forks Region EDC, so there's been a lot of back and forth. Also, they've also engaged Northern Plains Nitrogen, and also the FAA has been involved. So I think what I've been told by Mr. Schauer is, we probably had, several factors that were looked at first time. I would anticipate a many-fold increase of factors that are being looked at right now that were above and beyond what were looked at when the first plume analysis was conducted back in that 2014-15 timeframe. So what I've been told is it's going to be more complicated, it's going to have a lot more factors as we move forward, and so there will be a lot more things on the table for us to review. So I anticipate, he anticipated having a draft sometime in July for all the stakeholders that I just noted to engage with, and then I would presume over the next few months there'll be engagement with you as the City Council and the Jobs Development Authority with all the interested stakeholders and come to some sort of resolution about how and if to move forward is what I would anticipate over the next several months. So things are coming to a pace. He did warn me that it's more complicated than the first time it was done. And as I note, this is all being reopened because we are going to build a new lengthen the east-west runway so that we can accept commercial aircraft while we reconstruct the north-south runway. And so there's more factors to look at. And there's been some changes over the last 7 years too, of how the airports function, how UND Aerospace is functioning, and all those have been taken into consideration. And I think ultimately this new model will capture all that. We'll get some sort of number and we'll all get to weigh in on whether that makes sense, and it'll be publicly engaged too with all of our stakeholders. So you should know that there's been good engagement from what I've been told with Mr. Schauer. He's engaged with those partners, and we've kind of just facilitated and getting updates from time to time. But, we've gotten through the pandemic. It's gone on a little bit longer than we would have wanted to, but it's got to come to a resolution because we certainly want to move forward with the runway project, and that's kind of what's tied in at this point in time. So with that, Mayor Buczynski, that's where we're at. More information comes sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Any questions or comments from council or motions? Got a motion to approve from Mr. Veen. We have a second? Second from Ms. Mock. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. 4.1 carries unanimously.
4.5, special event, request for noise variance and letter of intent for commingling for Sertoma 4th of July celebration, July 4th, 2021.
Thank you. Ms. Dockler, please.
So I think that, excuse me, the aftershocks of COVID have really kind of doubled down on my belief that council has a unique position in serving the community to balance somehow the best interests of our economic and business, but also the well-being of our community as a whole and the growth of our families and retention of families and support of our families. And while I enjoy a beer just as much as the next person does, I also don't necessarily think it needs to be at every single event we have in the city. And the commingling requests, while I understand them and appreciate them, I also think that we are setting up some of our more vulnerable families and people within our community to struggle even more when alcohol is constantly present, constantly available, and at every single family event. I just don't think it's necessary, and that's why I voted no the first time at this reading, and that's why I'll be voting no again today.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler. Any further comments? Mr. Sandy.
So I'm interested if Ms. Dockler believes there shouldn't be any alcohol served at this event, or if it just shouldn't allow commingling.
No, because they've had the beer garden in the past. This is new to include commingling and not have the beer garden anymore. So I'm not advocating necessarily to take away what the event already had, but moving it into a more accessible realm is what I'm voting no on.
Any further comments?
Move approval.
Got a motion to approve from Mr. Weigel. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Kafani. He's back. All right. Do we have any further comments with the motion and second?
Comment, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Sandy, please.
I see no reason why, well, let me rephrase that. I understand Ms. Dockler's point. I also think that there should be events in our community that don't necessarily have commingling. I think until recently, I don't know if we've denied any commingling request to date. And we've only been doing this for a few years, I guess, but I'm not going to vote to deny this one because I'm okay with it. However, I think perhaps at some point we should have a general conversation about, are we just going to rubber stamp this? Because if we are just going to rubber stamp it, there's no point in these coming to the council. If we're not, then perhaps we should have some criteria as to when we will move them forward and when we won't. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Any further comment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I believe we got a 6-1 in the affirmative. 4.5 carries.
4.6, Obelisk Event Series funding request.
All right, I think we also got to hear quite a bit on this item. So I just want to open up for council for further comment.
Request for recusal again.
All right, we got a request for recusal. Do we need to get a motion on that, Mr. Gostick? We get a motion?
moved.
Yes.
We got a motion from Mr. Weigel and a second from Mr. Sandy. All those in favor of recusing Mr. Weber signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Mr. Weber is recused. All right, any comment or thought that council has on the item? Certainly now would be the time. Yeah. Ms. Mock.
I guess part of my concern with this is not so much with the event or the funding request as it is We do a set aside for special events funding, and so I guess I kind of see that as how we budget for these types of events. So I have a little, I guess, issue with the process of it coming outside of our special events funding and kind of seeing it through that process, just because that kind of removes, I guess, the politics of it. And, you know, I would be interested in conversations if that funding, which I don't believe that's been increased for several years, if we need to increase that or something with this next budget cycle. But I guess I would be interested as to why that can't go through that existing process.
Yeah, and I don't know if that special events was, Mr. Weber, you've got an answer to that question, so you're on the spot here. Great.
Mayor Boczynski and members of council, so the reason why we actually are going with the ask, and we came to Todd with this idea, was we are looking for seed funding. So we did meet with Julie, and since this is a larger amount, since we are going with weekly programming, it was a larger amount than they typically grant towards concepts like this. The only other one that kind of does follow this example was our street fair, and we did start it by doing some of those things about 7 years ago and had some seed funding through them. This is a little bit quicker timeline, as you can probably see, but the idea was really just to try to use this as a economic driver for downtown, make sure that we're bringing people downtown. It's why we're pushing for this to be a free event, not trying to drive revenue for ourselves, but drive revenue to the downtown businesses. And so slightly a COVID reaction, but also just trying to get some seed funding so that way next year we don't have to come back to the city at all.
So then you're thinking in the future you could go through the special events kind of programming and not have to, this would just get you off the ground?
Yes.
Yeah, well, but I would just point out too, this is, this ask, we could, you could approve at 50,000, you could approve at 40,000. There's, certainly any number of things that you could do. You could not approve it at all. I think the special event certainly has its place, but if we're looking at this as sort of your welcome back from COVID type of event, then maybe that does fit differently than the special events. I agree with you. It is special events. We can look at that budget item and see, but I guess we've got the matter at hand and, decide one way or another tonight on this. Mr. Phelan, you ready to say something?
No, Mayor Boczynski and Council Vice President Mock, I think these were really one-time. That's why we're proposing the use of that original funds we received, those federal funds that were, really meant to help hard-hit areas. Certainly we're going to have a budget discussion about, we're going to have significant reserves we're going to put into 2163 of those funds. Really, we wanted to do both. Requests came to us, so what we try to do is provide you as much information as possible, just so that they could engage with you as part of the conversation on that. Not knowing that administratively we shouldn't be the gatekeeper, say, no, you can't come talk to the city council. We want to just facilitate that they would get an opportunity to discuss. I see these as one time coming out of the COVID pandemic. And I think one of the unique things about what the Downtown Development Association, it's not only for downtown, but it's free events for the entire community that I think are based on concerts and films. And I think much of it will be, back to the earlier conversation, will be non-alcoholic, family-oriented. And it was meant, I think, as a celebration of, coming out of the pandemic, providing family entertainment, and try to boost really entertainment in our community with really the hardest hit areas. And so through that spirit, that's kind of what, and I was talking to Mayor Boczynski, it's really quite incredible that we're holding live events. If we were all here in October and November, and we said, you know what, in June, we're going to be holding events. We're going to be kind of where we're at today. It's quite an incredible story that we're even talking about having all the events that we're having. So I think it's a sign of success that we're here for these quality of life initiatives. But we've also put on up to 50. That's the up to request. I think both event planners, and we have one succeeding, I think they're just looking for assistance. And what I instructed them, ask for the up to number, and it can always be edited from there.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Further comments from council? Mr. Sandy.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I really appreciate city staff and the general attitude of let's try to figure things out. That's really, really good for our community. And I think it's a testament to the general attitude that our city staff and administration have. And I really, really am very proud of that, because there are lots of organizations, lots of government organizations that aren't that way. And many of us deal with them on a daily basis, so I really do appreciate it. But part of that is, part of the good of that also has some bad, is that you typically would have gatekeepers, and so if city staff weren't excited about this, it wouldn't have gotten to us in the first place, right? Which therefore we then become either the good guys, you know, the heroes, or the heels, which, you know, that's okay. It is what it is. We unfortunately ran for office. I think it's interesting how many organizations and how many things need funding right now. Just this weekend in the paper, reading about the United Way and their effort to build a daycare, and there's a perfect example of where not only could all of these funds go, they probably all should go there, right? We should, as a community, we all know that there's a daycare shortage in town, significant daycare shortage, and the funds for that daycare for the United Way would, in general, help everyone in our community. So, although I am really excited about these projects and I want to provide some funding for both of them, I also think in general, somebody should call the folks at the United Way and see what we can do to help. And I'm not saying that, you know, we need to push all our chips in there, but I think we should, as a community, try to help them with whether it's money or support or anything that we can do, or even if it's, everybody here should give to the United Way, do them a favor. There are people in town that need daycare. I think Mr. Veen and I were speaking about this earlier. I think some percentage of what we had originally talked about, Mr. Weber, if we said $25,000 tonight and we got you going, would that be, I mean, I want to clarify one other thing. We're fortunate to have CARES funding dollars today. Neither Mr. Weber nor HB came in and asked, they didn't realize that we had extra CARES funding and come forward asking for money. The timing on it is purely coincidental. So, but I would move for $25,000 for your project if that will make a difference. If it's not, if it's a waste of money, tell me. And
the difficult thing for us is obviously, and that's why we tried to break down that budget, was just to kind of show, and so that's 6 weeks worth of programming with really all of us just kind of like making enough money to be able to pay those bills for it. And so it's not to say that it wouldn't help. It would probably shrink the amount of impact that we could do. So it would probably take us down from the 6 weeks down to 3 weeks. And so, like I said, it would still help, and it would give us some of that option to be able to start, but we were really looking for something pretty big. So completely understand on either direction on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Veen?
Yeah, as Mr. Sandy said, we talked a little bit about that too, and what those amounts, because it's a great request. I think it's a one-time seed money you talked about. We talk about using this money appropriately, and mental health has been brought up as a critical piece of this, but I think sometimes bringing people together, the music in itself has got health advantages to it. So I'm in favor of supporting the $25,000 that Mr. Sandy has suggested.
Was there a motion between either of you, or are we?
I'll move we move forward with $25,000 donation to the project.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Do you have further comment on the item? Ms. Mock?
And the intent was for these to be free, so this is also kind of an offering for the public. They can attend and participate.
Yeah, that would still keep them free for sure. Like I said, the intention here is not for us to make revenue, it's us to be able to bring people downtown. That's why we're not going with food trucks. We want to push people to those local businesses. And so the push here was to go all the way kind of up until our street fair. So that way it was really 6 weeks of activity with that. And so I'm going to take this back to Ad Monkeys if you guys want to go that 25,000 rate and kind of plan it out. We have another meeting this week. And so kind of plan out those next 3 weeks, see what that looks like.
Thank you. Any further comment? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I believe that motion at 25,000 carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Weber. You got halfway there.
Thank you.
4.7 Greenway Takeover Festival funding request.
All right, well, I think we also have members from HP Sound and Light here too, if you have further questions, but probably the same process. If anyone's has further comment on this item as well, please. All right, do we have anybody that wishes? Is that?
Sure.
Mr. Weber, please,
Thank you,
kick it
Mr.
off.
I said it last week, I'm a little bit surprised and I'm thrilled that HP Sound and Light is here. I've been worried about you over the last year. You have given so much to the community in the past, doing this pretty much on your own. I think this is a fantastic use of healthcare dollars for the mental, spiritual, emotional health of the entire community. And I'll move approval for the full amount.
We got a motion from Mr. Weber. Do we have a second? All right, Mr. Weber, we don't have a second at the full amount. Was there
Like an auction?
would you like to further the discussion possibly at another amount, since we don't have a motion at that? Is there any further feelings on that? We got Mr. Veen over there.
I would approve at half, 50,000, 50% of the request. I make that motion.
Well, we got a motion for Mr. Veen at 50,000. Do we have a second at 50,000?
I'll second. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, please.
Mr. and Mrs. Lonsky, thanks for being here tonight. And honestly, thanks for what you do for our community. This has been very difficult. This is a very difficult issue just because we know the needs are so great across our community. We also, I believe that, as I mentioned last week, and Mr. Veen and I were speaking earlier, this does go to mental health. I believe it's a very good thing for our community. We're hoping that, I know you don't want to make it smaller, but maybe you can not make it as big as you were planning on making it without making it smaller. And so
Yeah, I mean,
we want to be supportive, we really do, but we also have to look at there are others that need funding as well.
Yeah, we understand, thank you, council, thank you, mayor. We just were looking for some help, and that's really all we're looking for.
So I think the question is, are we still going to be the presenting sponsor at 50,000, or are we double platinum?
Well, we can figure out something, so.
Okay. All right, sorry, Mr. Veen first, then you, Mr. Weber. Sure. Mr. Veen, please.
Yeah, I would just add, I've only been to one or two of the events. I think they're amazing events. I'm impressed with all that you deliver to the community at no cost. I mean, that's just unreal what you've done. I looked a little bit at what you're looking at first, maybe some of the individual costs, and I think I think you can deliver a great event with the additional 50 is my hope.
Okay.
And that it still fits into the overall utilization of the funds, but I think it's very appropriate to give you $50,000.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Weber, please.
I'll try one more time. I'm not unsympathetic to this concern about using those health dollars for more explicit direct health services. So we've got a motion on the floor right now to use 50,000 of that. Maureen, my understanding is we have budgeted event dollars that are not currently designated from this year's budget. Are there city event dollars that could be used to make up this other $50,000? Because after more than a year of the pandemic, the hunger for social activities, for outdoor events of this sort, the community for enduring this pandemic, they deserve not half an event, they deserve a full event. So I'm wondering if we do not have $2163 or somewhere else in the budget so that we can make a full Greenway Takeover Festival instead of the great half a Greenway Takeover Festival of 2021.
Mayor Buczynski, Councilmember Weber, I believe the funds that you're referring to, we have some cash set aside, City Festival dollars. That was, when it was set aside for the purpose of a combined event from the Ralph and the Alaris Center for hopes of putting together a city festival that didn't come together at that time. I think that was back in 2014. Of those dollars, there's about $150,000 remaining. So it would be a city council decision, but that is the cash account that I believe you are referring to.
Yes, thank you, thank you. That's a fantastic idea, I think. And that would allow us to have a full Greenway Takeover Festival instead of the great half a Greenway Takeover Festival of 2021.
Yep, Mr. Sandy, please.
Yeah, so Mr. Weber, great idea. That's one-time funding. There is no money that goes back into that pot. So once we spend that, that's gone. For example, the reason we put that aside originally was to help the Ralph or the Alaris Center attract a major act to our community. And so I'm not saying we shouldn't use it for this, I just want to make sure that people understand. And the only way we replenish that is if we actually budget another, for example, $250,000 to go into there, which is what we had originally set aside for a major event. And just because I'm a mathematician, for clarity, we were going to be 1/3 of the event, and we've already committed $50,000 of it, so technically we're at 83.3% of the original event. Not 50%, and 83%.
I was referring to the outcome of the festival. But, so is that a willingness then to amend the motion? Is that what I heard? So there's no support for using these dollars that have been sitting there for an event for seven years, when we need more than ever an event to reward the community for enduring this pandemic.
All right.
Mayor Buczynski, I just want to remind this city council, you did award $100,000 to the Ralph Engelstad Arena when we had the NCHC final tournament here this past year, and that was, I think, a good tournament. It was multi-day. Also, the Alaris Center benefited by
catering, yeah.
Catering lots of the team meals. So that was a nice joint, we'll call it festival, because it was multiple days, and both the Ralph benefited and the Alaris Center. I just want to let you know, we did expend about $100,000 of those funds from that account.
And so how much is, but there's still 150 approximately there?
Yeah, the original amount was $250, and you did authorize $100,000 of it most recently.
And so it wouldn't be replenished unless we choose to do so, but we've got $150,000 sitting in a city event fund. HB Sound and Light has bankrolled this on their own in the past. Of all the sectors in our economy that have been impacted by the pandemic, hotels were hit, but they were able to find some ways, and they stayed in business. Restaurants were hit, but we allowed, we didn't collect full fees on licensing. We allowed delivery. We've even extended some of those. What have we done for the event industry? We've got $50,000 in federal funds. It's not costing us a dime. They weren't asking for 100, but the city staff said, we've got 100 we could do here. We've got a motion on the floor to use 50 of that. We can't come up with the other 50 from the city event fund for this event? Is that what I'm hearing, really?
I think that the hope is that the private sector will step up and that the event will get funded, one way or another, I think is the hope. And I think it's important to note too that the CARES funding, it's not, at this point, they're no longer federal funds. They're coming back. That's already gone towards our police budget. So we really have complete freedom. And those funds aren't use it or lose it. So they will be, held as reserves. And I believe the plan was to put them towards 2163. So there may be options later on, but I do think it'd be hard to, completely, diminish the funds that are in that other account at this time. I think, had people been wanting the 100,000, they probably would have seconded the original motion, I guess is what I'm getting at. But we love your passion. I think that's, we can clearly see that you want to fund the whole thing.
I do. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks.
Mr. Weber.
Other comments?
Mr. Kavami, please.
Yep. I just wanted to quickly just state that, again, while I support HB Sound and Light and the Greenway Takeover, I think it's a great event. I plan to attend it and spend money there. It is a private event, being held by a for-profit company. So while I will support it, I can't vote yes unless they go through the official channels, and two, we have a plan for this money. So I completely understand that there is support for it, and I do want to support them. But I'm going to vote no tonight because I think that we should have a plan for all of that money. And I also think that there should be official channels rather than just coming to council.
Thank you, Mr. Kavami. Mr. Veen, please.
Quick question. Can you tell me, or maybe for everybody's understanding, how many day event you put on and how many different?
It's a 4-day event, so it's
It's a 4
Thursday through Sunday. Jamie's big dream was always it would be capped out with 2 weekends. And then in the middle could be filled with spa or local things. But
We're not there yet.
we're not there yet. I think, we've put Greenway Takeover on the map. The first year we were told, no, this is impossible, but people know the Greenway Takeover now, that we get comments from all over the area. And we're gonna grow that. We're gonna take that Greenway Takeover Festival here, and I think with your guys' help, we'll get there faster. It's kind of what We Fest started. It was just a small community event, and it grew. So I think with your help, we can just get there a little bit faster.
And obviously last year, no event?
No event, no.
And so you're coming back to try to bring people back again?
Yep.
And how would this, both with and without, how would it compare to previous years as far as number of events and entertainment?
Well, our hope is to keep we still have the same number of days. We want to have the same number of entertainment or more. We don't want to go less. So we're hoping that we can make it all happen.
And we're never gonna put on a half event. I think Jamie and we're gonna make that event awesome. I think we're both perfectionists, and if our name is on it, it's gonna be a top-notch event.
So I guess that was the question that I was going to have, but you've sort of answered. We're going to get a good event out of 50,000.
You're gonna
either
get a
way.
great event.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any further comments? Well, Mr. Veen's got one more.
Well, I'm with Mr. Weber on this one here. It's a really tough one, because I would like to see you be really successful, because I'm so impressed with what you've done and the risks you've taken so far. And I've been vacillating, as we talked about. I really can support 50. 100 is probably challenging. I'd like to see that money, that we've talked about, be used by, I'm going to just say, the Alara Center down the road too, to put on some things. We have some diversity, and we use that money throughout the community. That would be, again, ideal. So I'm just saying, I'm just talking out loud right now, because I understand the need, and I really support what you guys do, but trying to balance it has been the problem.
Right. Well, we just came to the city at this point because we had a weird year like everyone else, and we're just not in a position to do what we had been doing in the past. And we hope next year will be just great.
Thank you. Well, we have a motion and a second. I guess if there's any last comments, otherwise we'll move for a vote. All right, seeing none. We have a motion to approve at 50,000 for the Greenway Takeover event. And we have a second, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So I believe we got a 5-2 to vote, and it approves at 50,000. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
That concludes our action items. Is that correct, Maureen?
Yes, that concludes the action items.
All right, we're on to 5 information items.
5.1, statement of changes in cash balance as of April 30th.
Thank you. And 6, citizen comments. I believe we had 2 online comments that are attached. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right.
Not related to any specific agenda item.
Okay, so we'll put those in the record. 7, approval of minutes and bills.
7.1 is the vendor list as presented.
We have a motion to approve the vendor list. Mr. Sandy moves. Second for Mr. Weigel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The vendor list is approved.
7.2 are your minutes from April 19th.
we have a motion to approve the minutes? As is from Mr. Sandy. We have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Dockler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. Mr. Phelan, City Administrator comments.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right, moving on to 9, Mayor and Council member comments. Starts with you, Mr. Weigel.
The only thing, Mayor, is thanks to the Cub Scouts that came out, I actually spent an entire weekend with Jasper and Caden over there. And my son Camden, we were out in Illinois BMX racing. So I think I'll put them on the spot and ask them what their favorite part of the meeting was, if they want to come up to the microphone.
Does anybody want to step up and earn a public speaking badge by telling us what their favorite part of the evening was?
All right, so.
Going once, going twice. All right, well, you guys have been very patient. Mr. Weigel, please continue.
That's all, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight.
Ms. Dockler.
Just that I wanted to thank everyone in the community that went and celebrated World Refugee Day at the first farmers market of the season this last weekend, and also Juneteenth. And then we are in the works of planning Pride event for August of this year for Grand Forks, and so it's just really nice to see all of the different folks that we have that make up our community coming together and celebrating one another.
Thank you, Ms. Dockler. Mr. Weber? All right, Mr. Kavami, are you still with us?
I am. Just a quick little note, just thank you to HB Sound and Light to everything you guys do. It wasn't a vote no to HB or the Greenway takeover, it was just the circumstances in the process. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kavami. Mr. Veen?
I think it is.
Council Vice President Mock? Council President Sandy?
Thank you, Mayor. No, thank you, other than regarding the permit for Northern Plains nitrogen. I appreciate that the study is in the works and almost done. As I had mentioned to everyone in the past, I think we should get an independent aviation consultant, somebody independent in aviation, to review the results of that study, because we'll get them and I will have no idea what they mean. Perhaps we should have somebody else look at them. There's something, food for thought for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. For my comments, I just want to thank all the city staff that worked on the Ambassador Hotel case. I think it was, it's not finally resolved, but I think it was an amenable resolution to have Mr. McGregor, understand the way that it was going and find it acceptable. It was a tough situation, and it's getting to our rearview mirror. So thank all the staff that was involved in that. Other than that, thank you, Boy Scouts, for taking the time and sitting still. Maybe a patience badge, merit badge would be in order as well. I think it was a great council meeting, and hope everyone has a good week. So thank you. With that, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Got a motion from Mr. Weigel, second from Mr. Weber. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.